I'm going to jump right into it. And the first thing I want you to know is that regardless if you're in any of our big four, I'm going to explain our big four here in a minute. Um, there's always a place for you to sell your product or service to the federal government. The US federal government purchases everything from A to Z, and there's no other entity in the world that purchases more than the US federal government. So the first thing you want to know is, hey, am I a small business? And the US federal government determines whether or not you're a small business based on your NAICS code. That's you hear people say, "What's my NAICS code? What's my NAICS code?" That's a 6-digit code that the federal government uses to identify every possible job there is. So if you're a painter, if you paint walls, that's a 6-digit NAICS code. That's 222000. If you're a landscaper, it may be 333000. And how's that determined? Okay, so that's my NAICS code. How do I know if I'm small or big? Well, it's based on your overall revenue for the last consecutive 5 years. And so we're going to say that a painter's revenue for the last consecutive 5 years should not exceed it over $15 million per year. That's a lot of painting, right? So the majority of all our businesses throughout the country are small businesses. And of course, small businesses are the backbone of the American workforce, because they employ more people than any other, all the other big firms together. So with that being said, so if you're a small business and your NAICS code and you're a painter, and we said it was 222000, and we said that the 5-year revenue determination to be small was 15 million a year or less, you're considered a small business. Next slide, please. And there we go. I got ahead of myself there. Size standards determined by NAICS code industry, business type, sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, or any other legal form. Okay, long as you are a legal business, there it is, and that's how you determine by your NAICS code. So the obvious question you may have is, hey, how do I find out what my primary NAICS code is? So we have in the state of Missouri and throughout the country, we have PTAC personnel, procurement personnel. Here in the St. Louis area, there or here in the state of Missouri, they're called Missouri PTAC, and they're throughout the country. And here in the St. Louis area, we have two that are very regional, one in South City and one in the Kirkwood area, and they can help you determine what your 6-digit NAICS code is. So later on, if you would like their information, I'll be happy to give that to you, or you just Google Missouri PTAC, regardless of where you are in the state, or if you're even visiting us, attending this webinar from across the country, you can just call your local SBA and say, hey, who's my local PTAC person to help me determine what my 6-digit NAICS code is. Next slide, please. Size restriction, I've already covered that. Non-qualified businesses, of course, you must be in the US, and of course, nonprofit businesses are not included in this, in the NAICS code. Next slide. Wow, I'm really way ahead of myself. And that's how you determine your NAICS code. NAICS code define establishments are used for administrative, contracting, and tax purposes. So it's important that you determine what that NAICS code is, because that 6-digit code will be determined, will say, hey, this is what I do best. So I said that 222000 was my primary NAICS code. I'm gonna have a host of secondary NAICS codes. And did we say 222? Let's change this. Let's say 222000 is my primary NAICS code, and I'm a roofer. So I put HUBZone for a living, and that's what I do best. That's what I want to attract you contracts in 222000, but I have a host of secondary NAICS code. Yeah, roofing is what I do best, but I can also do siding. I can also do some painting. I can also do some framing. I can also put up guttering, so forth and so on. But 222000 is my primary NAICS code. Next slide, please. Does the government buy what you sell? And that's the most important thing. And although the federal government purchases almost everything from A to Z, they don't purchase uh, barbershops or services. They don't purchase daycare services as a whole. Of course, they have a daycare in some federal building, but they don't purchase those as a whole throughout the country. So the way, once again, the way to determine if the federal government purchases or buys your product is to get with your PTAC personnel. And what they will do is first help you determine what your primary NAICS code is. And remember, I get calls all the time from small businesses that say, hey, what's the federal government looking for? Or what's trending for the federal government? What's the hot item? Well, the federal government is always looking for anything, any and everything from A to Z. So the way to approach that is, what is it that I do best? Because remember, even though I'm going to sell my product, or I want to sell my product or service to the federal government, I'm still competing with those other small businesses in Oklahoma and Nebraska and Miami and Chicago, so forth and so on. So it's important that I put my best foot forward and that my capability statements speak for myself. Even though I'm 222000, I'm a roofer, a primary roofer. Can I sell technology? Mm, maybe, maybe not. But there's no way in the world I'm going to compete with someone who does it every day. Because remember, I have to put my best foot forward. Am I capable of fulfilling that contract? Do you know where to find contracting opportunity? And once again, your PTAC personnel will help you um, figure out how to find out what contracts have already are forthcoming. But more importantly, you want to find the history, what contracts have already been purchased in that primary NAICS code. And then from that information, you want to also determine, okay, those are the contracts that those federal agencies are purchasing. Then now I want to know what type of small business received that contract. Was it a big business? I mean, was it a big business? No, it couldn't be a big business because it was a small business contract. So was it a women-owned services able vet, HUBZone, or 8A firm, or just a small business at large? But all that information can be found out through your PTAC personnel, or you can do it yourself through US Gov Spins. Is one of the websites that even I am able to manipulate to go in there and find out that information. I can go in there and put in the different parameters of 222000 in the greater St. Louis area, and I can find out all the contracts that were already awarded, that have already in the last 5 years to those firms in that area, and it would be all the 222000 that women-owned businesses have won, and they're in the greater St. Louis area. Next slide, please. How the government buys in goods and services. Keep going, please. World largest buyer. I've already mentioned that. 500 billion a year, and actually in 2019. The federal government, we don't have 2020 numbers because we know 2020 numbers, FY 2020, would be down because a lot of businesses due to the COVID year, but $132.9 billion was spent on small businesses. And so you see where it's mandated by Congress that 23% of federal contracts must be spent for small businesses. 23%. That's 5% for an 8A, 5% from women-owned, 3% for service-disabled vet, and 3% for HUBZone. That's a total of 16%. Where's the other 7%? So if you're not women-owned, if you're not 8A, if you're not service-disabled vet, if you're not HUBZone, that leaves 7% for small businesses at large. So you don't have to be in what we call the big four, 8A, women-owned, service-disabled vet, or HUBZone, to sell your product to the federal government. You can sell your product as small business at large. And right now, the federal government is actually exceeding, the federal agencies are exceeding that mandate by the Congress to almost 26.5%. So they're well over the 23% threshold that they have to meet that is mandated by Congress every year. Next slide, please. Full and open competition, small business set asides, and sole source. So like I said, it can be all full and open, All right, remember we said that 5% is set aside for women-owned service-disabled vet. I mean, for women-owned and HUBZone. I'm sorry, for 8A, and 5% is set aside for 8A and women-owned. 3% is set aside for service-disabled vet and HUBZone, and then the other 7% is for small businesses at large. So with that being said, you can have set asides. And what does that mean? That if it meets a certain dollar amount, that federal agency, instead of competing that contract, they can set it aside for you based on your past experience in that particular area and based on your ability to market to them. Okay, so you can have sole sources. They can sole source that contract to you, and it has to fit a certain dollar amount. It can't be so large that it's competitive. And then the larger dollar amounts, of course, are full and open competition. So regardless, whether or not it's in women-owned services, that or HUBZone, or whether or not, if the contract is so big, it has to be full and open competition. And that's how the federal government decides whether or not in what category to put that contract. Next slide. We just cover full and open, set aside, the rule of two. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. So the federal agency says, hey, I want to put a roof on the old courthouse in downtown St. Louis. I'm thinking about doing this the next fiscal year. And I would want to see, I have to send out a sole source. I have to send out a sources sought. That's my first step in there in the marketing. So how do I find out if I'm a small business? How do I find out about the sources sought coming out? Well, I've already contacted my PTAC personnel, and they have been able to connect me with those sources sought and all those different possible contracts that are coming out that I am interested in. I don't want to know anything about technology. I don't want to know anything about landscaping contracts or possibilities coming out. I'm in the roofing, and so that's what I want to know about. And so they were able to make sure that when those sources sought come out, that I get an email notifying me of that. And so now I can apply for that sources sought. And what the federal government is looking for, a rule of two. And in some cases, there are subcontracting limitations, meaning that, okay, I win the contract, but I don't have to, I may be limited on how much I can subcontract out. Okay. Then a sole source, one firm can provide compelling urgency in international agreement, national security or public interest, so forth and so on. Those are all the rules for sole source. But it must be imperative that you know that when you're doing a sole source contract, that you must be ready to roll with that contract. So in all of the federal government, you must have a line of credit and be ready to provide the be able to finance that contract. Because if you're doing business with the federal government, what are we? We're still in the early part of December. Let's say we started this contract in December, but of course, I've been working on it since maybe October. We're going to start 1st of December, and you probably won't see the first actual paycheck for services rendered from the federal government. Say I'm putting that roof on until, let's say, January 15th. But of course, what do your employees want every Friday? They want to be paid. So it's imperative that you're able to have the ability to finance your federal government contract, whether it be out of your own pocket or a line of credit through a financial institution. Next slide, please. Okay, I've already covered that. Okay. 5% for women owned, 5% for services for 8A, small disadvantaged business, 3% for service disabled vet, and 3% for HUBZone, total of 16%. And then of course the other is 7% is for small businesses at large. Set asides are reserved for small businesses between 3,500, a micro purchase, to up to 255,000, a simplified acquisition threshold. Next slide, please. Now, this is so important that you know what agencies buy your products and you want to find your niche. Remember, I already spoke about that. What is it that I do best? Um, Understand the areas of government spending and know your competition and the contract. And here's what how can I find out all this information? Well, one, your St. Louis Public Library, your St. Louis County Library can help you with that. They can help you. They have search engines that they love to have you come in and say, hey, can you help me find out what my competition is in this particular field? But also your PTAC person can help you find that out and help you nail that down. So it's important that you keep your PTAC personnel and your resource personnel on roller on automatic redial, because it's imperative that you understand who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with, who your competition is. Um, I want to know those federal agencies that are buying in my product or service, because why would I want to waste my time with the Defense Logistic Agency when they're not buying my product or services? And I can find all that information out through my PTAC personnel. Next slide, please. Understanding your customers, influencers, small business specialists, SBA point of contact buyers, and end user. So a lot of times when I get calls from different firms, they'll say, well, I want to get in contact with that contracting officer. It's not actually the contracting officer that you want to get in contact with in order to market to. You want to market to that small business personnel in that federal government office. So in every office, for instance, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer has a small business personnel. That's who you want to market to, because that person is in charge of making sure that that product gets, that service is completed for their agency. So the contracting officer and the contracting specialist and their whole group, their job is to manage the contract for the best service for the federal government. That's what their job is to do. And granted, you want to get along with them, you want to know who they are, you want to be able to have a working relationship with them. But it's the small business personnel in that particular office that you want to be able to market to, that you want to impress, that can hopefully help you keep you afloat on and keep you informed of what's going on that particular solicitation that we started with a source of sought. So it'd be a source of sought, and then they need at least two small businesses to say yes, we can do that, and then that's when the process starts. So you want to make sure that your capability statement is complete and strong, so that you're able to influence that small business personnel. And of course, if it's meets the dollar arrangement, it could be a sole source, and therefore, or it can, you, if you want it in women owned, because you're a woman owned business, which takes it out of a lot of competition as opposed to small businesses at large, you're able to influence her based on, wow, this firm is really strong. Okay, next slide, please. How to find decision makers. Call and make an appointment. Network and contact a small business specialist. Submit an invitation to bid. It is so important. And here in the St. Louis area, and I'm sure throughout the whole country, we have a host of different ways that you can network. Um, you, I believe it's called 1,000 Cups of Coffee. I believe they are still meeting, even though it may be by during this COVID time period. It may be during over the web, as opposed to import to as opposed to in person. But there's a place that you can network with other small businesses and give a pitch. If it's your turn to pitch, every Thursday, let 2 or 3 business pitch. This is what I'm doing. We also have Small Business Week, and of course, during COVID, we've been slowed by that. However, we have different events during Small Business Week, and it's always the first full week in May that we do Small Business Week nationwide. And St. Louis, we're very proud of the fact that the SBA Small Business Week in St. Louis is a whole week of events. And we have events throughout our whole region. So St. Louis shares the state with Kansas City. We have the eastern half of the state of Missouri. Kansas City is responsible for the western half, and we have events throughout the whole eastern half of Missouri to host, to allow small businesses to get together and network. We have matchmaking event where we bring in the federal agencies in the area to come in, and so you can get a chance to speed date with them. You get about 5 minutes with them to let them know this is what I do. You exchange information, but more importantly, you spend that time determining, hey, maybe I can see you later. Maybe I can stop by Scott Air Force Base later on and get an appointment with you to give you some one-on-one time, give you some more face time. So there's all kind of events like that. The Veteran Business Resource Center always is still having events, and so does our Small Business Development Center. They have a lot of networking events and different events to help you grow and build that foundation. And of course, our Women Business Center as well out at the Urban League is such a great facility. Yeah, I tell you, they didn't spare the checkbook there. It's a great facility, so you should get out there if you're. And they also help men, but we have a host of different organizations to help you build up that strong foundation so you're ready to bid. And then I'm putting together my so I'm a small business, I'm putting together my packet to go after this contract. I don't quite understand the different languages, so we have all types of different webinars that are free from the SBA, whether you're in the 8A HUBZone, women-owned services able vet, or just a small business, and you want to sign up for these webinars. We have a host of different webinar providers through the SBA. And I think right now we're sitting at about 9 different webinar providers that provide different webinars on how to understand government contracting, how to I got a problem with the contracting officer. How do I resolve that issue that still make it so that I can still have a good positive working relationship? How to market to that federal agency, so forth and so on. I bet you there's over 75 different webinars that you could possibly sign up for. And guess what? We even provide those webinars in the afternoons and the evenings. We've heard small businesses say, hey, look at all these great webinars that they're doing today. I'm nothing doing today. So how can I attend these great webinars when they're only being provided during the day? So now they're being provided on the evening, in the evening and weekends. So that's another way to grow. And then of course your PTAC personnel, there it is again, I'm saying our PTAC personnel, Missouri PTAC personnel, they have some great classes too on how to help you understand how to do business with the federal government. And all these webinars are free. So if knowledge is power and this knowledge is free, shame on you for not taking advantage of it and starting to read up on it. Whether you ever use it or not, you always have it. That's the great thing about knowledge. You always have it. Okay. Next slide, please. And there's some of the assistance that I just mentioned. SBA Resources Business Opportunity Specialist. That's what I do. Procurement Center Representative. So let's say that you want to go over to Scott Air Force Base and you want to meet with Transcom, and we have a person over there. She's a procurement center rep, and her job is to make sure that you're able to get 5 minutes of time that she tries to help you get in that front door, to help you get some time to pitch your product or service to the federal government. And she is responsible for the western half of Missouri, and I mean the eastern half of Missouri, and I believe the whole state of Illinois. So we, once again, that's one of the services we provide for you to help you build a strong foundation. Government contract assistance, we can get you that through our PTAC personnel, consulting and workshops, marketing resources, Fed bids op, so forth and so on. Those are all the different sites that we have that helps you grow. The system award management, dynamic small business search. So remember, I have my NAICS code. I know what I want to do. Now I want to sign up to do business with the federal government. It used to be a time where I would have to sign up with the Navy. Now then I would have to sign up with the Defense Logistic Agency. Then I would have to sign up with the Corps of Engineer. Not anymore. We have one centralized sign up spot, and that's where you sign up, you put all your information in there, and then you're good to go. But then you have to go to the dynamic small business search, and that's where you put up your capability statement. So it also works both ways for the federal government. So what if I'm a federal agency and I'm in charge of the old courthouse down at the downtown St. Louis, and I need to put in some new plumbing, and oh, it's getting close to the end of the calendar year, and I'm a little low on my not quite meeting my 3% on women-owned businesses. So what do I want to do? I want to go into the dynamic small business search. So after I signed up for System Awards Management, and the name has changed slightly, but it's the same thing. After I signed up in SAM and I registered my business, saying I'm ready to do business with the federal government, then I went into dynamic small business search and I put in my capability statement. Now I'm ready to do work. I'm ready to go. And so, but if I'm a federal agency looking for you, as opposed to you looking for the solicitations that I'm putting out, I'm going to go into dynamic small business search. I'm going to put in, we're going to say, we said plumbing at the old courthouse, all the plumbing needs to be redone. So I'm going to say, let's say the plumbing is 444000. Okay. And that's the next code. And I want it to be a woman-owned business because I'm a little low on my meeting my women-owned criteria this year. And here's a chance for me to make up some of the difference right here. And so I'll put that in. I'll put that in the dynamic small business search, and all the firms throughout the country that are women-owned, that have the NAICS code, primary NAICS code, or maybe even secondary NAICS code of 444000, meaning that they do plumbing, will pop up. And then I can start looking at their capability statement and seeing what type of work that they've done in that plumbing. And then that will help me determine, okay, wow, let me contact these firms. Oh, I see that this firm's an 8A firm in the St. Louis district. Let me call the business opportunity specialist, Gary Alexander, in the St. Louis district and ask them about their great plumbing company in the St. Louis district, on and on and on. So it works both ways. Earlier, I said other resources that you can use. USA Spending is a great resource. It's a great website because you can go in there and see what the federal government has already purchased on. It provides you the history. It provides you the type of firm that won that contract. It can tell you whether that firm is getting ready to graduate, because based on that information, you can look it up and determine whether or not that, if it was an 8A contract, and then you can find out when that firm is getting ready to graduate, and so forth and so on. So that's a good website. And once again, as I stated earlier, even I'm able to manipulate that website to get the best out of it. Okay. And GSA subcontracting directory. Remember, subcontracting is a good way to get your foot in the door to start doing work with the federal government. Don't be too proud to subcontract or thinking that this is a step down. Absolutely not. This is a way to show that you're able to do the work, but more importantly, it helps you understand how to do business with the federal government, and it also introduces you to the players in the federal government in that particular NAICS code. So be willing to do subcontracting work. And we have someone in the St. Louis district office that she's responsible for 10 states, right up and down the Midwest, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Missouri, all right up and down the Midwest. She's responsible for 10 states, and the subcontracting, she's making sure that subcontracting big firms that receive government contracts are meeting their subcontracting needs. So that's another place to get some additional work. Next slide, please. Oh boy, I'm way ahead of myself today. Building a capacity, land a contract, team agreement, joint ventures, men and protege. And joint ventures or men and proteges are really great because what they do is they help you build your capability statement. So let's say that I'm a small business and my buddy John's a small business, and we're both doing plumbing, and We have different capabilities, but together we can form a joint venture to improve our capability statement, to improve our overall ability to go after a federal contract, and we can go after it that way. But let's say that my buddy Mike is a big business in plumbing and I'm a small business, and he wants to be my mentor, and I'm going to be his protege, and he's going to infuse some additional services into my business. It can be cash, it could be back office assistance, it could be technical assistance, managerial assistance, it could be just training, just overall training, and to help me grow. And then that's what he's going to do for the mentor protege. Then together, out of that mentor protege, we're going to form a joint venture. So we're both in the same NAICS code, and he's a big business, I'm a small business. We can form a mentor protege, and after that, we're going to form a joint venture, and now we can go after a small business contract. So now my capability statement is really improved because he's helped me improve my capability. Because remember, he infused technical assistance, managerial assistance, back office assistance, cash training, whatever it may be. He improved my overall capability statement, and now we can go after a contract. So the obvious question is, why in the world would he want to do that? If he's a big business, why wouldn't he want to waste his time or invest his time in helping a small business in the same NAICS code? Because now he is eligible to work on a small contract through the federal government that he would not have been eligible for, because now we form a joint venture. He has to do at least 49, or at a minimum 49, no, at a maximum 49% of the work or less. I have to do 51% of the work or more, but 49% or less of something is better than 0% of anything. So he is now capable to work on a federal government contract that he would not have been eligible for. So that's one of the reasons mentor proteges are great asset to everyone, because remember, the federal government wins because 23% of all contracts must go to small businesses. So that's another contract that's going to a small businesses, helping us meet our mandate that Congress has. The small business wins because they received the contract, and the big business wins because they are now able to make some money, maybe be able to work on a contract that they would not have been eligible for in the past. All right, next slide, please. Go back one. There you go. Okay, Duns and Bradstreet. So of course, if you're just a new business getting started, you're needed your Duns and Bradstreet, and remember, that is free. That is free. So if you're paying for your Duns and Bradstreet, you're wrong, because that is a free service. And don't get me wrong, there are firms out there that do good business that'll say, hey, I can help you get your Duns and Bradstreet. I can get you registering SAMs. I can help you obtain a commercial and government cage code, and I can help you get government contracts. And some of those firms are good at what they do. But all of these services that they're charging you for are services that are normally free. They're most like they are free through the federal government, and you have people that are trained to help you do that, and your tax dollars is already paid for those services. I can't tell you how to spend your money, but I will tell you that it's imperative that you understand that when you get into this type of business, if you want to do business with the federal government, make sure that you use your services that have already been paid for through your tax dollars, or before you get out your checkbook. Next slide, please. And there it is. So you want FedBiz Ops, the advantages of registering with beta.SAM.gov. That's what I was saying. The name has changed slightly, but it's really one-stop shopping. If you want to make sure that you're doing business with the federal government, you only register in one place, and it can be kind of tedious, but we have our PTAC personnel will be happy to sit down with you and help you work through that process at no cost to you. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to cover the Big Four 8A Business Development Program. I've already talked about that a little bit. Unlike the other three, which is Women-Owned, Services Able Vet, and HUBZone, the 8A Business Program is a 9-year program. And this program helps you. This program, it's a time limit on the program. The first 4 years are your developmental year. The last 5 years are your transitional years. And it's one time. Next slide, please. So I can't be in the 8A program as a as a plumber, wait a couple of years and get back into the program. You just simply can't do that. So it's one bite at the apple. So it's imperative that I make sure that my business is strong and ready to go, and that my foundation is solid when I get ready to get into the 8A program, because those 9 years go fast. So you must be socially disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged, 100% control your business, 51% ownership of your business. So that's the rules for understanding the 8A program. Next slide, please. Certify.SBA.gov. And so the every application in order to get into a program is done through certify.SBA.gov. So you can actually send in the a paper copy, and that's the website for that. And the reason for that is because the very Division Program Certification Eligibility Office, there's only 2 in the country, one in San Francisco if you're on the west side of Mississippi, one in Baltimore if you're on the east side of Mississippi. They're able to assign one person to you to help you understand, to make sure that your applications are complete before it's moved on to headquarters for approval. So that's why everything is done through certify.SBA.gov. Next slide, please. Know the rules of 8A certification. I cover those. Ownership, you must remain 51% ownership the entire time you're in the program. 100% control and manage. You have the potential to be successful. Good character, contract information, understand what contracts you're going for, and understand the small business program that supports you. And I want to take a minute to talk about character. The federal government realizes that business and life is cyclic. Everything is now always up. You know, we have our ups and downs. So it's imperative that when you're filling out applications to become a 8A firm or a HUBZone firm or women-owned or services able that you divulge all the information that applies, because the federal government is going to find out, and what they're going to do is hire third-party investigative services, which is another small business, to check and to ensure that you are who you say you are. But if you've had issues in the past, will that prevent you from getting into the program? Absolutely not. But if you don't tell it up front, it would. So it's important that you make sure that you explain everything as clear as possible as you can on the character part of your application. Next slide, please. So women-owned small businesses. Take advantage of the annual prime contracting goals. Build capacity and grow and access to set aside for women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. And we have a great women-owned center in the St. Louis area, as I stated earlier. Next slide. At the Urban League in St. Louis, Missouri. Just a great business, a great foundation, and it really helps. And they do work with men, but they do a great job out there. So if you're a woman-owned business and you're looking for a way to maybe increase your overall capability statement, I would highly recommend that. You must be 51% ownership. Once again, that's the same rule. Highest officer position. So I don't know how many times, like in the St. Louis district, we rotate phones, and I actually had phones yesterday, and I'll have them again this Friday. I always get a call. I didn't get one yesterday, but I did get one last week where a guy calls and said, well, my wife owns the business. I go, well, how come your wife's not calling? And so it's important that the woman is the highest officer in the position if it is a woman-owned business. So you don't want to try to get something over on the federal government. And so that's important. Proper next code, managerial experience. The person must manage the daily operation, be the person in charge. And Unlike in the 8A, they would like you to be at least 2 years in business. There's no minimum time to be in business to get your WOSB certification, okay? But must be 51% ownership their entire time. Next slide, please. Economically disadvantaged, and this applies to all four of them. Personal net worth, your adjusted personal net worth must be less than $750,000. What does that mean? So it means that the equity in your primary home, the equity in your business does not count against you, and also any money that you have, any funds that you have saved up in a IRA, a Roth IRA, or a 401k does not count against you, okay? So that's important. So your adjusted net worth must be less than $750,000 to get in. Your 3-year average income must be less than $350,000 a year, meaning that you paid yourself less than $350,000 a year for the last 3 consecutive years, and your overall fair market value of assets must be less than $6 million to get into the program, okay? And that's for every one of these, for women-owned services, able vet, HUBZone, and 8A program. Next slide, please. WSB eligibility process. As of July 15, 2020, you must go through beta.SAM.gov. That is the new site, okay? Next slide, please. After October 15, third-party certificates will provide demonstration of evidence for the certification process. So there is a way that you can actually get your certification. It's going to cost you some money, and believe me, this is not something that you can't possibly do yourself. But if you would like to, these are current SBA approved TPCs that can help you with that. The El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the National Women Business Center, the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce, and the Women's Business Enterprise National Council all have the authorization to help you with your WBO. Okay, next slide, please. WOSB, I mean. And so there are different NAICS codes, okay, that not all NAICS codes are for women-owned businesses. They have pulled out the federal government and said, these are NAICS codes that we feel that the women-owned businesses have traditionally done a lot of good work in, and that they normally, it doesn't mean that's not the only codes, but these are the codes that women-owned businesses have been really strong in and traditionally done good work, and that they tend to migrate to. So we want to make sure that these women, that these NAICS codes are kind of set aside for the women-owned program to give them a foot in the door, to give them the capability to get a piece of that American pie, because we know that the federal government is spending $132.9 billion a year. So why not? So let's give them the capability. So there's separate NAICS codes. And then the rule of 2. A contracting offer has reasonable expectation that 2 or more WSBs will submit an offer. That's the same thing I mentioned earlier about when the sources sought come out. And the contract must be awarded at the fair market price, okay? Fair market price for the federal government. Remember, what is the best possible contract for the federal government, okay? And that's so important, because price is one thing, but it also means that you're providing a good product or service, because remember, we have our war fighters out there. So if you're providing something for our nation to keep up its security, it's imperative that its price is good, but that the product or service is also just as good. Next slide, please. Service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. So this is the third of the big 4. Next slide. Qualify for set-aside opportunities, build capacity and grow, establish joint ventures. It's so important. Next slide, please. So this is for service-disabled vets, okay? Service-disabled vet, 51% ownership requirement. We've heard that before. Proper NAICS code, managerial experience. You must manage daily operations. Next slide. Oh, wow, that was a short one. Service-disabled vets, I want to go back that in the greater St. Louis area, we have the Veteran Business Resource Organization. It is a regional office, but it's headquartered here in St. Louis, and I highly, everything that we do, when I say we, I mean the SBA does for small businesses, the Veteran Business Resource Organization concentrates on veterans and veteran family members. So if my mom was a veteran, my dad was a veteran, that I could still use the Veteran Business Resource Organization in order to help me grow my business. Great services. They've been #1 in the country a couple times in the last 8 years. They did a great job. Like I said, it's a regional office. When I say that, I think they're responsible for 4 connecting states to Missouri, but they're headquartered right here in St. Louis, down on Washington Avenue, next to the T-Rex building. You should really give them a call. They would like to hear from you if you're a veteran, or your parents was a veteran, or your spouse is a veteran, and you want to do business with the federal government, or you have a small business that you need some assistance with. They do a super job. Okay, next slide, please. And HUBZone certification. Next slide. So HUBZone is the last of the big 4. Keep going, please. HUBZone is a great program. Okay, and it was designed by a Missouri legislator that that said, "Hey, how do we make sure that the underutilized business zones in this country also getting a piece of this government pie? Huh? How do we make sure of that?" So you must ownership 51%. Principal office must be located in a HUB zone, and I'm going to cover how do you determine a HUB zone here in a minute. 35% of your residents must live in a HUB zone. You must have the right size small business size standard, and we know that's determined by your next code. And you review HUB zone locations. So how do I determine if my business is located in a HUB zone? I go to the SBA website, I click HUB zone, and a map will show up, and I just simply type my address in there of my primary business, of my business. Not the address of my home, the address of my business. Oh, okay, great. My business is located in a HUB zone, and the majority of HUB zones are in rural areas, but we have HUB zones also in the city as well, in the city of St. Louis. So, but it's important that you type that address in there, because the line is drawn somewhere, and how do we determine where the line is? How was it determined where the line is drawn? The line was drawn based on every year the 10-year census. So we just went through a census in 2020. The results have not been produced yet, but the HUB zone map will change. But let's say I was in the HUB zone, and based on the new results in 2020, and I think they're coming out later on this year, and well, no, in early 2022, the result of that census that we did in 2020, let's say that it knocks my firm out of the HUB zone. Well, then I have 3 years of still grandfather clause in there. So I'm not automatically kicked out, which means that I also get set asides of contracts. So let's say that I'm a women-owned, service-disabled vet, 8A HUB zone firm. Then you're a contracting officer's dream. Because remember, if I'm mandated by Congress that 23% of all contracts must go to small businesses, you can receive an 8A contract because you are a woman-owned, service-disabled vet, and you're in HUB zone. I can still get credit for those, even though it was designated as an 8A contract. But what if I'm none of those, and I still want to sell my product or service to the federal? What if I'm none of those, and I still want to sell my product or service to the federal government? I can as small business at large. Okay, next slide, please. Different places determine, and I believe you're all going to get a copy of these slides when this is over. And you can see where you can get HUB zone assistance and so forth. Next slide, please. Okay, there I am. You can contact me. There's my cell number. We are not working in the office. We are actually working from home. So definitely give me a call on my cell number if you had a question, or you can shoot me an email. But I know I went really fast. As you can tell, I'm prior service. I spent 22 years in the military, and twice during that time when I was a major, I was a talking head. And so I've been known to talk really fast and say a whole lot and go really fast. So if there was ever a time to ask a question, it is now, and I am ready. So let's get with the questions.
Thank you so much, Gary. So the question we had was towards the beginning. We had somebody ask, what about nonprofit businesses? And this was when you were talking about those NAICS codes.
Okay, so the the SBA Small Business Administration was set up to help for-profit businesses. So doesn't mean that we can't help you for nonprofit, you can't sell your product or service to the federal government, but doesn't mean that you can't utilize our services. For instance, you had some questions about your business plan or whether you should rent. You can definitely utilize our counselor in SCORE. I forgot to mention SCORE, Service Corps Retired Executive, and you can also use our counselors at our Small Business Development Center that will be happy to assist you, but you won't be able to sell your product or service to the federal government if you're a non-for-profit.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions in the chat right now. We got about 7 minutes left. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. I also put some links in the chat. So Gary is a great person to talk to if you need help with selling your product to the federal government or just anything else about those A-Days, the hubs, women-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses. But if you need help with any of our resources, you are able to schedule a one-on-one appointment with us where you get an hour of time to talk about how to look up things for your small business or your nonprofit. And that is our Book a Librarian form. I also put in the chat, if you do not have a library card with St. Louis County Library, you're able to apply for one through a Google form, and you must either live in St. Louis County or have a business in St. Louis County or nonprofit. You can live in St. Louis City, St. Charles City County, or Jefferson County to get a card with St. Louis County Library. And then the final link I have, if you could please just take a moment to fill out the form for this session, you'll be entered in to win a $15 Amazon gift card. And any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And Gary kind of mentioned it at the end. I will be sending slides. This was recorded, so it'll be sent with the recording as well. So you'll have all those wonderful links Gary had throughout the presentation.
Yeah. Also, would you like to talk about the speaker series that the SBA will be participating in with the St. Louis County Library starting the first Tuesday of January? Am I correct?
Yeah. So Angela's been setting those up. Is that the Ask SBA series or?
Well, actually, so I believe that the St. Louis County Library has a small business speaker series throughout the year, and it's the first Tuesday of every month. And I know that I am scheduled to speak on January 5th, and then I think the rest of the week um, during this the St. Louis County Library that my coworker Sean Burchard will be doing Ask SBA. He has it. I think he's providing that webinar like 4 different times the rest of this week. So you get a chance to ask the SBA anything that you possibly want, from PPP to EIDL to how do we give grants, so forth and so on. And my coworker Sean Burchard would be doing that the rest of this week. So I know you can check the St. Louis County Library schedule to listen in to those different webinars that he'll be providing.
Yes, yes. And for the rest of the Expo events, if you just go to the St. Louis County Library events page, you can search Expo and you can see what we have offered for the rest of the week. I do see your session on January 5th, starting and managing a small business. And it looks like we have selling your product to the federal government again in January. So to find any small business related webinars, you can just go to the events page and type in small business, and you should be able to find all of our events. But I haven't had any questions roll through. Gary, do you have any parting words?
I do not. Don't feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're open every day. So every work day, Monday through Friday. So we look forward to hear from you. Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you everybody for attending. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and stop recording, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye-bye.